Sarah's beginning. The wooden floors of Murphy's Irish pub creaked under Sarah Martinez's worn sneakers as she carried another tray of dirty glasses to the kitchen. At 23, she had been working at the neighborhood bar for 8 months, but the other employees still treated her like she didn't belong. The regulars barely acknowledged her presence, and her whispered behind her back whenever she struggled with the heavy beer kegs or fumbled with the complicated cocktail orders. "Sarah, table 6 needs another round," called out Mike, the head bartender, without looking up from the register. His tone carried the same dismissive edge it always did when he spoke to her. Mike had been at Murphy's for 12 years and made sure everyone knew it. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved behind the bar with the confidence of someone who owned the place, even though he didn't. Sarah nodded and grabbed her notepad, weaving through the crowded Friday night crowd. The bar was packed with construction workers, office employees, and college students, all seeking refuge from another long week. The air was thick with cigarette smoke, despite the no-smoking signs, and the jukebox in the corner played classic rock songs that everyone seemed to know by heart. Table 6 housed 4 men in their 30s, still wearing their work clothes from the auto repair shop down the street. They had been drinking for 2 hours and were getting louder with each beer. As Sarah approached, she could feel their eyes following her movements, and she braced herself for whatever comment was coming. "Well, well, look who's back," said the man with grease-stained overalls whose name tag read Tommy. "Our little waitress. Hey, sweetheart, think you can handle carrying 4 beers without dropping them this time?" His friends laughed, and Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Last week, she had indeed dropped a tray of drinks when someone bumped into her, and the incident had become a running joke among the regular customers. She forced a smile and pulled out her notepad. "What can I get for you?" she asked, keeping her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "4 and maybe some of those wings if you think you can manage it," Tommy said, exchanging glances with his buddies. "But go easy on the sauce this time. We don't want to overwhelm you with too many instructions." Sarah wrote down the order and headed back to the bar, where Mike was already shaking his head. "Those guys giving you trouble again?" he asked, but his tone suggested he found it more amusing than concerning. "Nothing I can't handle," Sarah replied, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. She had been handling difficult customers her entire working life, from the diner where she worked in high school to the coffee shop that laid her off 6 months ago. But Murphy's was different. Here, being underestimated wasn't just an occasional annoyance, it was a daily reality that followed her from table to table. The truth was, Sarah needed this job desperately. After her father's construction accident left him unable to work, she had become the primary breadwinner for her family of 4. Her younger brother was in his senior year of high school, and her little sister needed new school clothes. The rent on their small apartment was 3 months behind, and the landlord had already posted 1 eviction notice. Working at Murphy's paid better than most places that would hire someone without a college degree, but it came with a price. Every shift was a test of her patience and self-worth. The other waitresses, Jenny and Lisa, had been there for years and treated Sarah like an outsider who would probably quit within a few weeks anyway. The kitchen staff ignored her requests unless she asked 3 times, and the manager, Bob Murphy himself, rarely spoke to her except to point out mistakes. Bob Murphy was a heavy-set man in his 50s who had inherited the bar from his uncle 20 years ago. He spent most of his time in the office doing paperwork, emerging only to chat with long-time customers or to address problems. Sarah suspected he barely knew her name, despite the fact that she had been covering shifts for other employees and working doubles whenever possible. As Sarah delivered the beers to table 6, Tommy made another comment about her being the weak link in Murphy's operation. His words stung because part of her wondered if they were true. She had never worked in a bar before, and everything from operating the register to remembering drink recipes felt overwhelming at first. But she was learning, adapting, and working harder than anyone else on staff. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of orders, spilled drinks, and condescending remarks from customers who seemed to enjoy making her uncomfortable. By closing time, Sarah's feet ached, her back was sore, and she had a headache from the constant noise and stress. As she helped clean up, she overheard Jenny talking to Lisa near the beer cooler. "I give her another month, maybe 2, Jenny said, stacking chairs on tables. "She's just not cut out for this kind of work. Did you see how she handled that big party earlier? Total disaster." "Bob's only keeping her because she works for practically nothing," Lisa replied. "But even cheap labor isn't worth it if it drives away customers." Sarah pretended not to hear as she finished wiping down the bar, but their words echoed in her mind long after she clocked out. Walking home through the quiet streets, she thought about her options. She could quit and look for something else, but jobs that paid this well were hard to find. She could complain to Bob about the treatment she was receiving, but she doubted he would care enough to do anything about it. Or she could prove them all wrong. The idea started small, just a whisper of determination that grew stronger with each step toward home. Sarah had always been underestimated, from teachers who assumed she wouldn't graduate to employers who saw her as temporary help. But she had graduated, and she had survived every job that others said she couldn't handle. Maybe it was time to stop just surviving and start thriving. When she reached her apartment building, Sarah paused under the flickering streetlight and made a decision. She wasn't going to quit, and she wasn't going to accept being treated like any longer. Tomorrow, she would start paying closer attention to how the bar operated. She would learn every aspect of the business, from inventory management to customer service excellence. She would become so valuable that Murphy's couldn't function without her. The next morning, Sarah arrived at work 30 minutes early, something she had never done before. The bar was quiet and empty, with chairs still stacked on tables from the previous night. Bob Murphy was in his office, and she could hear him talking on the phone about supplier deliveries. Instead of waiting for her shift to officially begin, Sarah started setting up the dining area, arranging chairs and checking that each table had proper place settings. Mike arrived shortly after and seemed surprised to find her already working. "You're here early," he observed, tying his apron behind his back. "Wanted to get a head start on the day," Sarah replied, continuing to organize the tables. "Mike, can I ask you something? What's the best way to learn the drink recipes faster?" Mike paused in his preparation routine and looked at her with mild interest. It was the first time she had asked him a direct question about improving her performance. "Well, I guess you could study the recipe book during slow periods, and maybe practice making drinks when we're not busy." "Would that be okay with Bob?" Sarah asked. "Probably, as long as you're not wasting ingredients," Mike said. "Why the sudden interest in bartending?" Sarah continued arranging chairs as she answered. "I want to be better at my job. I want to understand how everything works here, not just the waitressing part." Something in her tone must have convinced Mike that she was serious, because he nodded approvingly. "All right, I can show you some basics during the lunch lull if you want." For the first time since starting at Murphy's, Sarah felt a spark of hope. Maybe she couldn't change how people saw her overnight, but she could start changing how she saw herself. She was no longer going to be just a waitress who was grateful to have a job. She was going to become someone who understood the business inside and out. The morning shift began with the usual crowd of coffee drinkers and breakfast sandwich customers. Sarah served them with more confidence than usual, taking time to remember their preferences and engage in brief conversations. When Tommy and his crew came in for their usual lunch beers, she was ready for their comments with a new attitude. "Look who's still here," Tommy said as she approached their table. "Thought you might have found an easier job by now." "Actually, I'm finding this work pretty interesting," Sarah replied with a genuine smile. "The bar business is more complex than people realize." Tommy seemed taken aback by her response, having expected the usual nervous reaction. His friends looked equally surprised when Sarah took their order with complete confidence and didn't appear rattled by their presence. When the lunch rush ended, Mike kept his promise and began teaching Sarah about cocktail preparation. She watched carefully as he demonstrated the proper way to muddle herbs, the importance of measuring ingredients precisely, and how to create the perfect foam for certain drinks. Her hands shook slightly as she attempted her first mojito, but Mike encouraged her to keep trying. "Not bad for a first attempt," he said as Sarah finished garnishing the drink. "The key is practice and muscle memory. After a few hundred drinks, you won't even have to think about the measurements." Sarah nodded, absorbing every word. She was beginning to understand that bartending was both an art and a science, requiring creativity, precision, and excellent customer service skills. For the first time since starting at Murphy's, she felt like she was learning something valuable that could benefit her future. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah found herself paying attention to details she had previously overlooked. She noticed how Mike organized the bottles for maximum efficiency, how he managed multiple orders simultaneously, and how he handled difficult customers with a combination of firmness and charm. She observed Bob Murphy during his interactions with suppliers and long-time customers, noting how he balanced business relationships with personal connections. Most importantly, she began to see patterns in the bar's operations that others seemed to take for granted. Certain customers always ordered the same drinks at the same times. Inventory moved in predictable cycles based on weekly events and seasonal changes. Staff scheduling could be optimized to better match customer flow throughout the day. By the end of her shift, Sarah had filled 3 pages in her notepad with observations and ideas. She stayed after closing to help with extra cleaning tasks, using the time to ask Mike and the kitchen staff questions about suppliers, costs, and operational challenges. To her surprise, most of them seemed happy to share their knowledge once they realized she was genuinely interested in learning. Walking home that night, Sarah felt different than she had in months. Instead of dreading the next day's work, she was actually looking forward to it. She had a plan now, a goal beyond simply collecting a paycheck. She was going to master every aspect of Murphy's Irish pub, and when the opportunity arose, she would show everyone exactly what could accomplish Sarah's transformation. 3 months had passed since Sarah decided to transform her approach to working at Murphy's Irish pub. The change hadn't happened overnight, but gradually, people began to notice that something was different about the young waitress they had once dismissed as temporary help. Sarah arrived at work each morning with a notebook filled with ideas and observations from the previous day. She had studied every aspect of the bar's operations, from the supplier delivery schedules to the peak hours for different types of customers. More importantly, she had begun implementing small improvements that nobody could ignore. The first major change came when Sarah suggested reorganizing the storage area behind the bar. She had noticed that bartenders wasted precious minutes during busy periods searching for bottles and supplies that weren't in logical locations. After getting permission from Bob Murphy, she spent her day off creating a new system that placed the most frequently used items within easy reach and grouped similar products together. Mike was skeptical at first, having grown accustomed to the old system over 12 years of working at Murphy's. But during the next Friday night rush, he found himself moving more efficiently than ever before. By the end of the evening, he had served 15% more customers in the same amount of time, and his tips reflected the improvement. "I hate to admit it, but this new setup actually makes sense," Mike told Sarah as they cleaned up after closing. "How did you figure out which bottles we use most often?" "I tracked every order for 2 weeks," Sarah replied, showing him the detailed charts in her notebook. "I noticed patterns in what people drink at different times and days. Tuesday night customers prefer wine and lighter cocktails, while Friday and Saturday crowds go for beer and shots. If we organize everything according to actual usage instead of alphabetical order, we can serve people faster." Bob Murphy overheard the conversation from his office and emerged with genuine interest. It was the first time Sarah had seen him pay close attention to anything she said. "You tracked orders for 2 weeks? On your own time?" "Yes, sir," Sarah said, suddenly nervous that she might have overstepped some boundary. "I wanted to understand how the business really works." Bob studied her notebook for several minutes, examining the charts and graphs she had created by hand. His expression was unreadable as he flipped through pages of observations about customer preferences, peak hours, and operational inefficiencies. Finally, he looked up at Sarah with what might have been respect. "This is impressive work," he said. "Have you thought about what other improvements we could make?" Sarah had indeed thought about other improvements, dozens of them, but she had been waiting for the right moment to share her ideas. Now, with Bob's attention focused on her for the first time, she took a deep breath and opened to a different section of her notebook. "Well, I noticed that we lose a lot of potential customers during peak hours because people don't want to wait for tables," she began. "But we have all this empty space near the windows that could fit 4 or 5 bar-height tables. People could eat appetizers and drink while they wait for dining tables, which would increase our revenue and keep customers happy." Bob nodded thoughtfully. "That's not a bad idea. What else?" "Our happy hour specials end at 6 o'clock, but a lot of office workers don't get here until 6:30, Sarah continued, gaining confidence. "If we extended happy hour until 7 on weekdays, we could capture that crowd before they go somewhere else. And I think we could increase appetizer sales by offering smaller portions at lower prices. People want to try more things, but the current portions are too big for sharing." Mike listened with growing amazement as Sarah outlined her vision for improving Murphy's operations. Her suggestions weren't random complaints about how things could be better. They were specific, well-researched proposals based on careful observation of customer behavior and business patterns. Over the following weeks, Bob began implementing some of Sarah's ideas. The window area was converted into high-top seating, happy hour was extended, and the kitchen started offering smaller appetizer portions alongside the regular menu. Each change brought measurable improvements in customer satisfaction and revenue. More importantly for Sarah, the changes brought a shift in how her treated her. Jenny and Lisa, who had once dismissed her as incompetent, started asking for her advice about handling difficult situations. The kitchen staff began taking her orders more seriously, and even the regular customers noticed that service had improved. Tommy and his friends from the auto repair shop were among the first to acknowledge the difference. When they came in for their usual Friday afternoon drinks, Tommy found himself sitting at one of the new window tables instead of waiting 15 minutes for his preferred booth. "I guess here knows what she's doing after all," he said to Sarah as she brought their beers. But this time, his tone lacked the condescending edge it had carried for months. "Just trying to make sure everyone has a good experience," Sarah replied with a smile that was no longer forced. She had learned to deflect negativity without letting it affect her confidence. As spring turned to summer, Sarah's role at Murphy's continued to evolve. Bob started asking for her input on scheduling decisions and vendor negotiations. She discovered that she had a natural talent for managing people and solving operational problems. More than that, she found herself genuinely enjoying the challenge of running a successful business. The breakthrough moment came during a particularly hectic Saturday night in July. Jenny had called in sick, leaving the bar short-staffed during one of the busiest weekends of the year. The dining room was packed, there was a 30-minute wait for tables, and Mike was struggling to keep up with drink orders at the bar. Sarah was moving between tables when she noticed a party of 8 college students getting frustrated with the wait time. They were clearly preparing to leave and find somewhere else to spend their money. Without hesitation, Sarah approached their group with a solution. "I know the wait is longer than usual tonight," she said. "But what if I set you up at the bar with some appetizers and drinks? I can guarantee you'll get a table within 20 minutes, and your first round is on the house for the inconvenience." The college students agreed, and Sarah quickly arranged bar stools and high-top space for their group. She coordinated with Mike to prioritize their drink orders and ensured that they felt valued rather than forgotten. When a table opened up 18 minutes later, the students were actually reluctant to leave the bar area because they were having such a good time. Bob Murphy watched the entire interaction from across the room, impressed by Sarah's ability to turn a potential loss into a positive experience. But what happened next surprised even Sarah herself. As the evening wore on, she found herself naturally taking charge of the floor operations. She coordinated with the kitchen to expedite orders, helped Mike organize drink priorities, and managed the waiting list with efficiency that kept customers happy despite the delays. Other staff members began looking to her for direction, and she provided it with confidence that had grown from months of understanding every aspect of the business. By the end of the night, Murphy's had served more customers than any previous Saturday in the bar's history. The combination of extended seating, improved workflow, and Sarah's natural leadership had created an experience that left customers satisfied and eager to return. As the staff cleaned up after closing, Mike shook his head in amazement. "I've never seen anything like that," he said. "You basically ran the entire floor tonight. Where did that come from?" "I've been watching and learning," Sarah replied, stacking chairs with the same efficiency she brought to everything else. "Tonight, I just put it all together." Bob Murphy emerged from his office with the night's receipts and an expression of genuine respect. "Sarah, I need to talk to you," he said. "Can you come in early tomorrow? I have a proposition for you." That Sunday afternoon, Sarah sat across from Bob in his office, surrounded by 20 years of bar memorabilia and faded photographs of Murphy's in its earlier incarnations. The conversation that followed would change the trajectory of her life and prove to everyone who had doubted her that could become indispensable. "I've been thinking about expanding the business," Bob began. "Maybe opening a second location or at least hiring an assistant manager here. After watching you work these past few months, I think you might be the person I'm looking for." Sarah felt her heart race with excitement and nervousness. What would that involve? Learning the business side of operations, handling scheduling, inventory, vendor relationships, staff training, everything that goes into running a profitable bar, Bob explained. It would mean more responsibility, longer hours initially, but also significantly better pay and the opportunity to grow with the business. The offer was everything Sarah had hoped for but hadn't dared to expect. 6 months ago, she had been just another waitress struggling to keep her job. Now, she was being offered the chance to help lead the business forward. "I'm interested," she said, trying to keep the excitement out of her voice. "What would be the first step?" "Start training with me on the management side. Learn how to read financial statements, understand profit margins, handle employee issues," Bob said. "If you can master those skills like you've mastered everything else around here, we'll talk about making it official." As Sarah walked home that evening, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. The whispered comments about her being had been replaced by genuine respect from, and customers alike. More importantly, she had discovered abilities she never knew she possessed and found work that challenged and fulfilled her in ways she hadn't imagined possible. But the biggest change was in how she saw herself. No longer was she someone who apologized for taking up space or accepted being underestimated. She had become someone who identified problems and created solutions, who led by example, and who understood that real success came from making everyone around her more successful too. The transformation was complete, but the story was just beginning, Sarah's victory. 18 months after Bob Murphy first offered Sarah the chance to learn management, she stood behind the bar of Murphy's second location, watching her team prepare for the grand opening. The new space was everything she had envisioned when Bob first mentioned expansion. Modern but welcoming, efficient but comfortable. A perfect blend of the original Murphy's character with contemporary improvements that would attract a broader customer base. Sarah's journey to this moment had been intense and demanding. Learning the business side of restaurant operations meant mastering skills she had never imagined needing. Analyzing profit and loss statements, negotiating with suppliers, managing payroll, understanding health department regulations, and developing marketing strategies. Bob had been an excellent teacher, but the learning curve was steep and unforgiving. The first challenge had come with scheduling at the original location. Sarah discovered that creating fair schedules that balanced employee preferences with business needs required diplomatic skills she had to develop quickly. Jenny had initially resented taking direction from someone who had been her junior just months earlier, and several longtime customers expressed surprise at seeing Sarah in a management role. But Sarah approached these challenges the same way she had approached everything else at Murphy's, with careful observation, detailed planning, and unwavering determination to succeed. When Jenny complained about her new schedule, Sarah sat down with her to explain the reasoning behind each decision and asked for input about how to make things work better for everyone. When customers questioned her authority, she demonstrated her knowledge of their preferences and her commitment to providing excellent service. The breakthrough came during a crisis in the winter when Murphy's main beer distributor experienced delivery problems during a 3-day storm. While other bars in the neighborhood ran out of popular brands and lost customers, Sarah had anticipated the shortage and arranged backup suppliers. She had also cross-trained staff to handle multiple positions, so when 2 employees couldn't make it to work due to weather, operations continued smoothly. "How did you know to plan for this?" Bob asked as they watched the competition struggle while Murphy's remained fully stocked and staffed. "I learned that in business you always plan for problems before they happen," Sarah replied. "I studied weather patterns, supplier reliability, and employee attendance records. When you understand the patterns, you can prepare for disruptions." Bob realized that Sarah's approach to management was the same systematic thinking she had applied to reorganizing the bar and improving operations. She didn't just react to problems. She anticipated them and created systems to prevent them from becoming crises. By spring, Sarah was effectively running day-to-day operations at the original Murphy's, while Bob focused on finding and developing the second location. She had increased revenue by 28% through a combination of improved efficiency, better customer service, and innovative promotional events that attracted new demographics to the bar. The promotional events were Sarah's idea and reflected her deep understanding of the neighborhood's changing character. She organized trivia nights that attracted young professionals, wine tastings that brought in couples looking for date night options, and charity fundraisers that connected Murphy's with local community organizations. Each event was carefully planned to introduce new customers to the bar while maintaining the loyalty of longtime regulars. Mike had adapted well to Sarah's management style and had even accepted a promotion to head bartender at the new location. 6 months ago, I would never have imagined taking orders from the waitress everyone called, he admitted during a planning meeting. Now I can't imagine working anywhere else. You've made this place better for everyone. The new location represented everything Sarah had learned about running a successful bar. The layout maximized seating while maintaining comfortable spacing between tables. The bar design allowed for efficient service during peak hours. The kitchen was equipped to handle a more extensive menu that would appeal to families and business diners, as well as the traditional bar crowd. Most importantly, Sarah had insisted on hiring and training staff who shared her commitment to excellence in customer service. Instead of accepting whoever was willing to work for low wages, she had recruited people who were interested in learning the business and growing with the company. The result was a team that worked together seamlessly and took pride in their jobs. On opening night, Sarah moved through the new location with confidence that came from months of planning and preparation. Every detail had been considered, from the placement of napkin dispensers to the timing of food delivery from the kitchen. She watched customers discover the space, noting their reactions and mentally cataloging small adjustments that would improve their experience. Tommy and his friends from the auto repair shop had driven across town to attend the grand opening. They sat at the bar, marveling at the transformation of someone they had once dismissed as incompetent. "I still can't believe this is the same girl who used to drop our beer orders," Tommy said to Mike as Sarah passed by checking on customers. "That girl never existed," Mike replied. "We just didn't bother to see who she really was." The evening was a complete success, with every table filled and a waiting list that extended past closing time. Customers praised the food, the service, and the atmosphere. Local media representatives, who had been invited to cover the expansion of a neighborhood business, interviewed Sarah about her journey from waitress to partner. "What would you say to other young people who feel underestimated in their jobs?" asked a reporter from the local newspaper. Sarah thought carefully before answering. "I would tell them that being underestimated can actually be an advantage if you use it correctly. While people are dismissing you, you have the freedom to observe, learn, and prepare. When the opportunity comes, and it will come, you'll be ready to show them what you're really capable of." As the evening wound down, Bob Murphy gathered the staff for a toast. 18 months ago, Sarah was a part-time waitress who most people thought wouldn't last a month. Tonight, she's my business partner and the reason we're opening this second location. Her success proves that talent and determination are more important than where you start or what other people think about your potential. Sarah accepted the applause from her team with gratitude and humility. She thought about her family, who had watched her transformation with amazement and pride. Her father had returned to light construction work, and her siblings were excelling in school, no longer worried about whether they would have to move or change schools due to financial problems. But beyond the personal satisfaction of providing security for her family, Sarah had discovered something valuable about herself. She wasn't just good at managing a bar. She was good at understanding what people needed and creating systems to provide it. She had found her calling in business leadership, and she was already thinking about future challenges and opportunities. Late that night, after the last customer had left and the staff had finished cleaning up, Sarah walked through both locations of Murphy's Irish pub. The original location looked different now, improved by 18 months of systematic enhancements and careful attention to customer needs. The new location represented the culmination of everything she had learned about running a successful business. In her office at the new location, Sarah opened a fresh notebook, the same type she had used to track drink orders and customer patterns 18 months earlier. On the first page, she wrote Murphy's Location 3 and began sketching ideas for the next expansion. The girl they had called was now the driving force behind a growing business empire. She had proven that being underestimated was only a temporary condition for those determined to rise above other people's limitations. More importantly, she had shown that success wasn't about proving the doubters wrong. It was about proving yourself right. As she turned off the lights and locked the door, Sarah smiled at the memory of her first night at Murphy's, when she had felt overwhelmed by carrying a tray of drinks and intimidated by customers who questioned her competence. That person seemed like someone from another lifetime, though the lessons learned during those difficult months had become the foundation of everything that followed. Walking to her car under the streetlights, Sarah thought about tomorrow's challenges and opportunities. There would be new problems to solve, new systems to improve, and new goals to achieve. But she was no longer the uncertain young woman who had once apologized for taking up space. She had become someone who created space for others to succeed, who turned obstacles into opportunities, and who understood that the best way to prove your worth is simply to keep proving it, one day at a time. The transformation was complete, but the story would continue. Sarah Martinez had learned that being called was not a verdict. It was just the beginning of proving everyone wrong while building something meaningful for yourself and the people who believed in your potential.